Content over everything!
Someone that's treated worse or seen as worse than Muslims in Europe is gypsies. Roma gypsies. They were the ones that I was very sad to see had like the most
decentralisation. Yeah, like Denmark, they've also started deporting Romas back to Romania.
Right, yeah.
In Sweden, they don't necessarily deport them. They usually go back in winter anyways.
It's sort of, do you know what it reminds me of a bit of Sarkozy, when Sarkozy demolished a bunch of the Roma gypsy. Yeah, I mean, there seems to be this general trend in Europe towards more like homogenous. Like if you're sort of outside of you're a little bit non-conformist. If you're more of outside of the established channels of living, like being a gypsy, for example. You'll be punished for that. You'll be kind of.
The interesting thing is just studies some very Danish attitudes towards immigrants in the UK. And I think the UK had more similar attitudes towards EU and non-EU migrants, whereas I think in Denmark they viewed EU migrants a lot more positively compared to non-EU migrants. So like they're less hostile towards Polish immigrants, for example.
Right, yeah. Well, when I was younger, when I first came to Britain, I'm an immigrant myself. I came to Britain in 2001 from South Africa, and I never had any issues because white South Africans they're very inconspicuous. They kind of just mix in very easily. But I remember the way Polish people were treated when I was a kid. It was quite shocking actually. Even though they were Europeans, they were Christians, they were like not that different really from the average British person. Yeah, even they were treated badly, but now they're treated a lot better. It seems to be coming to the mainstream a bit. I don't know, what do you think?
My family, my dad's Polish, they're from a long way back.
Okay.
He doesn't have a Polish name necessarily.
That would help.
But I mean, certainly when they came, it was just after they tried to.
Right, were they refugees then? Or? Yeah, okay. I have a Hungarian friend who also left as well. Took the opportunity in 1956. Actually, it was not to escape the Nazis, it was to escape the Soviet Union. So, just to be honest, this is bad. I'm quite fascinated by how so many Eastern Europeans, especially, have become so right-wing as a response to the Soviet history. When for me, it's transparently obvious that the Soviet Union was not a socialist regime. I mean, it had nothing to do with socialism, in my view. It seems to be the very opposite. How's it going? Yeah, not too bad. Trying to stay warm.
Get out of here, man. Get out of here.
Talking about Eastern Europeans. Sorry? Yeah, no, I'm a misogynist. I've been called a misogynist for having this. Julian Assange. Would you like one? I have another sticker if you'd like one.
Good Lord,
I've actually got a whole. I've got three.
crimes.
You think? Okay, are you being sarcastic or are you being serious? Because I think this is a serious issue and it deserves quite serious.
If he was tied up in another country, there'd be an outrage from the liberal media.
Yeah.
He's not being allowed to publish.
Well, look. What was happening with the foreign secretary in Britain when that lady in Pakistan? What was her name? No. Yeah, look what happened with her. The outrage and the disgust by Jeremy Hunt that this British national was being held in Pakistan. Was it in Pakistan or Iran? I can't remember where. Right. It was seen as despicable, wasn't it? But then look at with Julian Assange, because this is the thing, right? It's all very well when Julian Assange was exposing crimes committed by the Kenyan government or the Russian government. Right? Those are fine, they don't really matter. It's when he starts to look at what Britain's up to. Right? It's when he starts looking at what the United States is up to. Then he gets persecuted. It's a theme that's very prevalent throughout history. You can criticize other countries all you want, other societies, other ways of living. If you're an Athenian, you can criticize the Spartans. And if you're a Greek, you can criticize the Persians. But if you turn your analysis into your own country, you'll be punished. You'll be severely hounded and persecuted. I give two examples, the two philosophers that stand out to me as examples of this. And only one managed to consistently keep up that criticism throughout his whole life. The other one was terrified to continue. It was Marx and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. These are the only two that I have seen. Only two major philosophers I have seen in my looking at history who systematically critique their own society and managed to sustain that throughout their lives. Even Rousseau, after a while, was terrified of what would happen, of what the church would do to him. We're trained to look at our own society as normal. We're trained to see it like the way the fish swims in water. It's just water. They don't know it's even there, the water.
In-group preference, right? Same
Right,
as someone
in-group
betrayed the nation like Assange or the United States.
You say betrayed the nation. I think he's actually holding up the highest Western values.
How do you respond to the allegations though that he's been working with the Russian regime in meddling in democratic elections in the West?
I asked the question, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence?
Well, where did it?
Because the burden of proof is surely on you if you're someone saying that. I don't know if you are. But
Well, I mean, I don't know an enormous amount about it, but I know that Clinton's been emails. That's where they came from happening. And that was,
Well-
so I mean, okay, I think fair. What you're saying about kind of injuring country is fair enough. But when it's someone actually working for another regime, I mean,
listen,
can you really call
I just be
him
careful
high-minded?
about this. So he's been Corbyn.
Can you really call him high-minded?
Okay, I think he is high-minded. I don't think he was doing this for the Russians. I don't think there's any evidence of that, so I don't believe that, to be honest. I mean, I've heard Jeremy Corbyn is being described as a Russian stooge now, because Jeremy Corbyn has exposed the way Boris Johnson is planning to privatise our NHS, putting it up on the table for Donald Trump. Now, people have said, no, that's evidence coming from the Russians. I don't know why. I'm not attacking you personally for this, but I hear this a lot. Why do people bring up the Russians so much as a kind of boogeyman behind everything, behind Skripal, without showing proper evidence for that? Behind Trump saying, when Trump is actually massively anti-Russian, you should see some of the things Trump has done in reality is very. To say that he's a Russian stooge is remarkable. The way he's been expanding NATO and pushing for NATO to be properly funded by all its member states. I mean, that's really aggressive posturing. To say that's...
Rightfully so, right? The Germans spent .7...
So I don't know, I just quickly answer your question. Sorry, I'll answer your question next. I don't think that's true. I don't think Julian Assange is a Russian... is working for the Russian regime or trying to help them. Now, for me, the interesting thing is why have we not properly discussed the content of those emails? Hillary Clinton's emails, we should be discussing what's in those emails. It was found out that Hillary Clinton was well aware that the Saudi government was funding ISIS, supporting ISIS. Not private citizens, not individual Saudis, but the government of Saudi Arabia was supporting ISIS. Hillary Clinton was well aware of that. That's what those emails show, that WikiLeaks revealed. She was well aware of that, and yet she did nothing about it. She was the Secretary of State in the United States, and she did nothing about it. She didn't try and ask the Saudis to stop. She didn't reveal this to the public to show that it was a security threat. So now Assange is being called a security threat, right?
He is.
You might think that. I don't know, but is Hillary Clinton called a security threat for having this information about Saudi Arabia and not doing anything about it, not helping the public in America? This is the way the media frame things. It's fascinating. They can twist things so powerfully so that we see someone like Assange who's exposing a security threat as a security threat. He's someone who's actually trying to help the world understand what's going on, right? So we know a little bit more about how the world works.
Hiding from rape charges.
So first of all, he's not hiding. Second, I mean, right now he's in prison. He's actually being tortured to death. Actually, right now, according to 60 doctors who've actually gone to visit him in Belmarsh prison. 60 doctors who've gone to go and visit Julian Assange in prison. He's being tortured to death. Nils Meltzer, the UN special rapporteur on torture, has gone to investigate what's happened. He says Julian Assange is being tortured as well. Psychological torture is in many ways worse than physical torture. I've read examples of people who've been through physical torture, but because they have their mental faculties very strong, they can get through it. But if you're psychologically broken by isolation, by being denied, he wasn't even allowed one of his reading glasses. He has 2 pairs of reading glasses, and he wasn't even allowed to take one of them into his cell either. These kinds of things are just totally unnecessary, arbitrary infringements on somebody's.
We should get responsibility. We should hand him over to the United States where he should face crime to prison. It's not the British responsibility to find sanctuary. He was 2 cells away from Tory.
Well, actually, the British government is a signatory to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. It recognizes, like any other civilized Western country, that human rights are one of the highest ideals of modern civilization. Post World War II, when human rights were trampled over by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Okay, they realized that actually the human rights of every single individual is special, sacred, and needs to be protected. Julian Assange is no different. He's no different.
But that's just a liberal assumption.
I'm sorry, it's not a liberal argument. Conservatives believe this, liberals believe this. Everybody on the same end of this political spectrum.
Broken state
It's just delighted me.
He must have broken state secrets.
Just because you commit a crime and break state secrets doesn't make you lose all your human rights. You still have your human rights. We don't give criminals the death penalty for this reason. They have the right to life. They may have committed the worst crimes possible, but we still give them the right to life. This is what a civilized nation does.
Yeah, but we don't
It
give
doesn't
them
make
the
you
right
think.
to freedom.
No, but that right to freedom is taken away by due process. They go through a court of law. Has Julian Assange been given due process? Do you know right now he's not even given access to a laptop with which he can type up his defense. He's having a defense hearing in February next year, and he's not even given an opportunity to write his own defense and start preparing for that. That's the level of persecution he's going to. He's in prison right now for no reason whatsoever. Other than that, the British state wants to make an example of him.
What do you mean?
The British state wants to make an example of any journalist serving the public interest by revealing state crimes in places like Iraq. People like Iraq. That's irrelevant. I'm not here to talk about Tommy Robinson. If you like to get up on my ladder,
Well, do you know they were in neighbouring cells in Belmarsh, and they had a lot of conversations together, and they shared a lot of views.
if you'd like to get up on my ladder and talk about Tommy Robinson, you're more than welcome
I'm
to.
just showing your hypocrisy by choosing
double
one
standards.
but not
I only have so much time in the day to research important issues. For me, the issue of Julian Assange and his prosecution by the British government is for me a far more important, relevant issue than what's happening to Tommy Robinson.
You care more about
I'm not saying it's not
a
important.
prosecuted by the British
I'm not saying what's happening to Tommy Robinson is not important, and I'm happy to let you use my ladder to speak about it. But I'm here to talk about Julian Assange. We only have so much energy and time in the day.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not.
I thought Carl was my first.
Yeah, please.
Here's the friendly left.
Are you representing any of the thousands of
My friend, I've spoken about Yemen at Speaker's Corner before. The British government has licensed the sale of more than 5 types of cluster bomb to the Saudis for their war on Yemen.
Good stuff.
Yeah, you might think that's good stuff.
Pick up the arms
I frankly find the bombing of hospitals and the destruction of infrastructure used by civilians in places like Yemen, I don't find that very good. I wouldn't call that good stuff. I don't think that's good for. I don't think that's good for Britain's international reputation. Actually, if you are interested in how Britain is seen in the world, and you want to have a country that's respected and admired for its record, it's not going to be admired. The more that information comes out about how Britain is not only I mean, we've got here in the audience someone, I'm not going to point him out, he's a very shy person. There's someone in the audience who's written a very good blog, if you want to find this out. About war crimes in Britain, yeah. Britain is actually not only selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, they are in the control rooms. British army officers are in the control rooms helping the Saudis bomb these hospitals.
Service.
Now, I don't think this is living up to British values. If you're someone who considers... Sorry? Yeah, I can point you to the Guardian article where this is exposed.
But you can't claim the British values, Carl. You can only claim the liberal values.
Basic British values include respect for the rule of law, respect for things like due process. I think they include human rights now as well. Since the 1950s, that's become part of ordinary British people value.
Liberal values.
They may not completely understand what human rights are, but the idea that every human being has a certain requires a certain modicum of respect, even if they've committed a crime. They need to be, given food and water and so on. Due process and all the rest. Yeah, that's and the right to vote and things like that. That's I think those are basic British values. Now, my job at Speaker's Corner, why I see my job is to speak the truth and expose lies, especially in the cases where the British state is violating basic British values. We have an image of the British government which is not accurate. It's just not what they are portrayed to be. I mean, we all know this to an extent. Obviously, what goes on behind closed doors is not going to be the same as what's said to the cameras. But I do think, sadly, because we have such a powerful disinformation system in Britain. I'm speaking here about the right-wing media, like the Daily Mail but I'm not just speaking about the middle-brow newspapers like the Daily Mail. I'm talking about so-called respected newspapers, the Guardian, the Daily Telegraph. I'm even speaking about the BBC. So-called respectable broadcasters. they will often selectively frame things so that, like I said, someone like Julian Assange, who's actually helping national security by exposing threats to national security, like Hillary Clinton's collaboration with the Saudis, not actually revealing the extent to which they support ISIS. So he's exposing something that's dangerous to the British public and to the American public, and that he's framed as a security threat.
But he is a security
This is how it's done.
But he is.
Or like take someone like Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour manifesto would like to see all the recommendations of the Chilcot report implemented. Okay, so that involves, more accountability, so we stop committing war crimes, right? Going and invading Iraq illegally, that kind of thing. Now, Stella Remington, who was head of MI5,
God bless Stella,
pointed out something called the Iraq effect, the sevenfold increase in terrorism since the invasion of Iraq. She said, whatever you think of Saddam Hussein, killing him and getting rid of him has now led to a more unstable country. It's created a breeding ground for places like ISIS. So Jeremy Corbyn is not a security threat. He's trying to actually maintain national security.
Jeremy Corbyn,
yes,
with
Jeremy
this open
Corbyn.
border policy.
And yet MI5 will come out
With
and
this
say
open border
he's trying
policy.
to dismantle MI5. Sorry?
But how does an open border policy secure
He doesn't
a
want an
nation?
open border policy. That's
You
absolutely
actually-
ridiculous.
actually,
Why don't you actually take 10 minutes? 10 minutes. It doesn't take long to read the manifesto. Have a look and you'll actually see he's not interested in an open border policy.
He's not interested. He's not
I'm
pro-migration.
actually, to be totally honest with you, I'm not interested in talking about specifics of the manifesto. I think if you and I'm not a huge fan of Jeremy Corbyn, to be honest. The man hasn't actually spoken about Julian Assange. What's going on to Julian Assange? Not once has he raised this as an election issue. When this is one of the most important issues happening in current affairs today. Neither he or his shadow foreign secretary have said anything. I think that's shameful. So Jeremy Corbyn is not the perfect leader for this country. I don't think that at all. Is he a very good thing for this country though? Yes.
No.
Jeremy Corbyn would take us in a much healthier direction than Boris Johnson would. Jeremy Corbyn is hoping to give proper investment to the NHS. Jeremy Corbyn is hoping to create 800,000 climate change apprenticeships that will deal with climate change
We
crisis.
would go broke on
These are things we need to do.
We'd run out of money.
Jeremy Corbyn is hoping to do an audit of Britain's colonial history to find out what British imperialism has, how it's impacted places like, let's take Iraq for example. Iraq is Britain's favourite punching bag. It has been for 200 years, and no one knows about this in Britain. No one fully understands the gunboat diplomacy that has been employed against places like Iraq and Iran over the last couple of hundred years. Why isn't this in the curriculum? These are good avenues to go down. I think Jeremy Corbyn would be a good thing for this country. But like I said, he's not perfect. He hasn't spoken about Julian Assange in his election campaign. He's given a very vague commitment to a nuclear-free world, and yet he hasn't, in his manifesto, committed us to getting rid of Trident, the wasteful, disgustingly wasteful expenditure we put on those nuclear weapons, when we could be using that money towards relieving the homelessness in London, for example. That's just one example.
Scrap the
One
nuclear
example.
weapons and feed the homeless.
So that's Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn hasn't also committed to getting rid of tax havens, so he's not perfect. Jeremy Corbyn should be dealing with tax havens. He should be saying we should stop having billionaires siphoning away. Yeah, I'm ignoring you. We shouldn't be siphoning away all this money. We shouldn't allow billionaires to siphon away all this money to these offshore accounts. This is not acceptable. They should be pulling their weight, right? If you believe in the principle that you should give back some of what you earn to help the society you live in, because that'll make a better society for you, then actually you shouldn't allow tax havens. You should just close them down. It's just a common sense thing. So Jeremy Corbyn hasn't done that. But I think if Jeremy Corbyn got into Downing Street, then Labour would be able to move towards those policies. They may not have that as a commitment now, but it will open up the possibilities for that change. Right now we've had a realignment of left and right in Britain. There's a clear division between the left and the right. Under Tony Blair, when Tony Blair was in power, there was a kind of triangulation. Tony Blair was focusing on those middle voters. He wasn't very principled. He was just trying to get swing voters to vote for Labour. And if that meant watering down Labour policies so they sounded quite indistinguishable from the Tories, then he would do that. That's the kind of politician Tony Blair was.
He was a leftist cop.
He wasn't a leftist. Tony Blair was Margaret Thatcher's greatest achievement. She even said that herself. Under Tony Blair, the Labour Party became incredibly right-wing. They got rid of Clause 4. The Labour Party was committed to democratic socialism, right? To introducing a democratic socialist state in Britain.
Ownership of the means of production,
Ownership of the means of production,
distribution
right?
and exchange.
So bringing about real democracy in the economy. That was how they wanted to do. Now Tony Blair got rid of that. So to say that Tony Blair was a leftist, I don't think that's true. So I mean, trade unions became very alienated from Tony Blair during his rule. They didn't particularly like him at all. So you know, I don't know if I go into that narrative. But yeah, going back to Julian Assange, the man is dying right now. If we don't do something about it, he will continue to decline in his health, and like I said, may not survive.
Are you going to visit him in Belmarsh? Is he in Belmarsh?
It's very difficult
Two
to
cells
visit
away
him
from
in Belmarsh.
Tommy Robinson.
You could.
To be honest, I could go and visit him. I don't know what it would achieve. The man is like.
He's heading to the US, man. We're not going to give. We're going to hand over trade to George Corbyn.
He might tell you.
Rightfully so.
He might be allowed to
He
tell
should go
you
to a
stuff.
state with the death sentence.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm here at
all
Speaker's
happy,
Corner to try. I only have so much time. To be honest, I don't think it necessarily would help him visiting. Maybe it would. I was very sad to hear that some of his supporters were singing him happy birthday outside of his cell or outside of the prison.
Yeah.
He couldn't even quite hear them. He's so physically frail now because of the isolation, the stress that's caused him, that he couldn't even properly hear what they were singing. And he didn't even know it was his birthday. This is the thing. He had no idea they were even singing for him. It was only a few days later it was explained to him that it was your birthday. You know. This is what the British state is doing. They're trying to make an example out of Julian Assange, so that other journalists don't step out of line. Basically, you've got to be an obedient stenographer of state power if you want to be a journalist in this country.
No, he's wanted for trial in the United States.
If you step out of line and you try and expose, Western war crimes in the interest of national security, if you're trying to show the British public the extent to which American soldiers, like, have you seen the Iraq tapes? The helicopter gunman, the American soldier, shooting down innocent civilians, including 2 Reuters journalists, and then saying, "Nice, you got the kill."
God
nice.
bless our troops.
Right. No, listen, you're hiding behind a kind of sarcastic.
But you're seriously, Carl. You're
I'm not interested in talking to you, to be honest.
You're
Sorry.
saying you're not actually.
No, I don't want to talk to you. Sorry.
Look at the left rod.
The British establishment is ruthless. 25 years ago, I went to
I
a
actually
Sinn
prefer if you
Féin.
left my meeting, to be honest.
like Carl.
I prefer if you left my meeting, seriously. Sorry, what
I
were you
went to
saying?
a Sinn Féin meeting 25 years ago in East London, and there was a young Northern Irish Catholic lad, about 16 years of age, who stood up and said that he'd had electrodes attached to his testicles by the British state in Northern Ireland.
Well, listen, I don't know if that's true what happened to those people. I'm
And
not
I
gonna say
worked
don't
in a
know.
hotel many years
But
ago.
you know that actually happened to Obama's grandfather. Obama's grandfather was tortured by the British
Yeah,
state.
just
In the
surprised me.
1950s, he was part of the Mau Mau rebellion.
yeah, just
he was
surprised me.
living in Kenya at the time. According to Obama's grandfather, the British soldiers he was imprisoned by, they burned cigarettes in his ear. And they put his testicles in a vice. I mean, that's the kind of torture that the British state's known for among the
But every
the third
country
world.
virtually does it.
That doesn't make it okay for Britain.
I know it doesn't make it okay, but the reality is that every country
often it's
virtually
very
has
interesting.
these people.
Britain's victims will know more about British history than British people themselves.
Yeah,
Places
of
like
course.
Iran,
Yeah.
Kenya, British Guyana, they'll know more about British history than the Brits do.
Yeah.
They'll know more about the way rendition and torture has been used. They'll have this information. Sorry?
Why do you think that is?
Well, like I said, we have a powerful disinformation system in Britain. And I'm not just talking about the right-wing press. It's very easy to criticise the Daily Telegraph. To be honest, I prefer a challenge. To be honest, it's very easy to get up.
It's just silly adverts.
It's very well. No, you mentioned advertising. Advertising is a big part of this. The reason why a lot of the media can't really tell the truth is because they're beholden to advertisers. It's one reason why newspapers are very limited in the way they can speak. They don't want to offend their advertisers. They rely on that for revenue. So the Guardian is a good example of this. The Guardian had an article recently about climate change. I read it. It was like a few months ago. Just a typical article showing the dangers of climate change. On the opposing page, on the opposite page, there was an advert by British Airways. It was amazing. I was shocked by this. It was British Airways saying, not only will we help you go to the place of your dreams, we will even help you find a taxi when you arrive so you can get to your hotel.
Good aircraft.
This is terrible fossil fuel advertising. It's encouraging unnecessary
ironic,
fossil fuel abuse, right? And yet they were running this ad anyways, even though they were a newspaper committed to exposing the dangers of climate change and the fossil fuel industry's contribution to climate change. Now, that's one of the reasons why we don't have a functioning information system. It's limited. Newspapers, they are businesses, first and foremost. They're there to make money. They're not there to provide us with news. That's very kind of you. Red Bush, Khoibas. Yeah, this is my native tea from South Africa. Thank you very much. I mentioned. Oh wow, that's very kind of you.
This is very socialist kind of caring.
Yeah, this is very socialist. This is socialism in action, ladies and gentlemen.
Distribution of wealth. Would you like a cup of tea? I'm fine, okay, thank you. I'm fine. Truffles for the socialists.
I mentioned this is a South African tea.
Socialist truffles.
I can talk about South Africa.
Red feed.
I can talk about South Africa. Now I read this in the newspapers. This is very interesting. You know that the Queen, she almost refused an audience of Margaret Thatcher for Margaret Thatcher's support of the South African racist government, the apartheid regime. I'm South African. I didn't even know the extent that Britain supported the racist government there until very recently. I had to do some research.
But nor did most of the people in this country.
No, most of them don't. When South Africa invaded Namibia in the 1980s, and they 76 they invaded. My mistake. Thank you for correcting me. When South Africa invaded Namibia in 1976 and stole their uranium, took over their uranium mines. The British government was fine with buying that uranium. They had no problem with that at all.
And the American government as well.
And I remember someone in the audience, I'm not going to point him out, but he pointed this out to me, that some of that uranium was then sold on to Israel. You know, there's a very clear like system in play. If you take a few minutes out of your day, each day, to just do a bit of research on this. There are very good websites that have done good work on this. People like, there's the TJ Coles of the University of Plymouth, who's done a lot of research into this, the history, what Britain's actually, what its real role in the world is, what it does.
It's all anti-British.
Places like Sri Lanka and places like Kenya and so on.
Anti-British.
Crimes of Britain have very diligently, amassed evidence as to the extent to which Britain's been involved in these war crimes and these atrocities. It's there to look at if you're interested. And you're not anti-British for doing this. When someone at Speaker's Corner tells you that you're anti-British,
you are.
Tell them right back that actually I'm pro-British. I value the British values of freedom, free speech, international law, peace, human rights. I value them so much that when I see the British state violating them by supporting regimes like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Israel, that I'm not going to stand for that.
But you're claiming these are British values.
I'm going to hold the British state
values.
to British values.
These are left-wing values.
I'm sorry, but human rights is not a left-wing value. It was Eleanor Roosevelt, a conservative American, who actually framed the United Nations.
We'll go back to the Putney debates in the 17th century. The origin of
human rights are about as British as a cup of tea. I'm sorry, they are. Look at the Bill of Rights in 1688. The Bill of Rights. Many human rights are based on the English Bill of Rights.
They are.
A cup of tea is not English, it's from India.
Well, it was invented by an Englishman, actually. The tea that we drink was an Englishman.
Indian tea is Chinese tea.
That's where Behaviour leagues fell into popular.
So yeah, I'm not here to rant and be anti-British. I love Britain so much that I would like to see it live up to its values. I would like to see Britain live up to the values it claims to have. That's how much I love Britain. That's what a true patriot does. That's what a real English patriot does. They say that.
Poppycock.
You see what I mean? I'm not being crazy and anti-British for doing this.
You are, Kyle. Come on, matey.
Only someone who really doesn't care about Britain will be so subservient to the British state as to say my state, right or wrong, no matter what it does to Julian Assange, no matter what it does to Ireland or South Africa or to Kenya. I mean, Boris Johnson on Ireland is a complete liar right now. I just read recently. The Canary had a very good article recently about Northern Ireland. What's going on there? Boris Johnson said that he wouldn't. What he lied. He said that there wouldn't be like a what is it? A hard border, right? He said that there wouldn't be there would be no security checks. There would be no
surrender.
And he's a liar. No, he's a liar. If you actually look at his own policy.
I think he doesn't know what he's saying. He hasn't read the documents. So he makes it up as he goes along. And he knows that he's such an affable person that the average Joe public takes little interest in. Well, so what? The British people are the most forgiving people. Because they don't inform them.
I don't think they're forgiving Boris Johnson that much actually anymore. If you look, the gap is closing between him and Corbyn. This is why the elite is getting so hysterical. and they're coming out with all this rubbish about Corbyn being an anti-Semite, and they're continuing this rubbish.
It is rubbish.
I mean, I was quite curious as to why Ephraim Mavis,
most Jews
the
vote
chief rabbi,
conservative anyway.
Well, I think it's something like 7 or 8 out of 10 of them. Yeah.
So that's why they'd be against Corbyn.
But no, not necessarily. Well,
Yeah, they would.
no, they might have genuine fears of anti-Semitism. That's fine. But then the thing is, if you're serious about dealing with anti-Semitism, ask for evidence. If you're worried that a party has a lot of anti-Semitism in it, find the evidence for it, and don't just go on allegations and accusations. That's not enough. You need to find hard evidence. And
the Benson is headed by a Jew.
There was a study. Yeah, exactly. And someone like John Burko, the Jew, came out and said, "I have never had any experience with anti-Semitism in the party." I mean, we can't just consider the one voice. I don't think the chief rabbi speaks for all Jews in Britain. I'm not someone who. I wouldn't say. I used to be a Catholic, and I didn't really believe the Pope really spoke for all Catholics. Even when I was a committed Catholic, I didn't believe that. Just because you're a certain religion doesn't mean the
disadvantage of
Sorry? Yeah, I'm an atheist. I don't think Richard Dawkins speaks for all atheists either. The guy just goes on and on about the most minute issues. I mean, attacking religion, I'm sorry, I know Nick does this at Speaker's Corner, but there are so many issues today which religious people can help us on. Religious people often have far more ethical sense than a lot of atheists. I think the Soviet Union was an atheist empire. And look what they did. Look what they did to Eastern Europe. The Soviet Union
Kyle, you're
was
funny.
an atheist.
A lot of these problems that you say that religion can fix are caused by
religion. Is the most bigoted ideology in the world. Everywhere in the world, bigotry, racism, sexism,
you guys have
ignorance, brutality is by religious people.
Most religious people are not racist, sexist, misogynistic. Often it's religious people doing a lot of the activism I speak about at Speaker's Corner. It's Catholics going out and writing letters, and you can't be so. We got to look. The most dangerous religion today is the religion of the state. That man who came just now and said I was anti-British for pointing out these crimes by the British state. That religion of state, that worship of the government, to the point where you can't allow criticism of that government without framing it as anti-British. That's for me. That's a more dangerous religion than any form of Catholicism or Islam or Judaism. In my humble opinion, I don't think that's really on. Now, this is why I started to go towards anarchism when I was about 17 or 18.
You mean anarchy?
Well, yeah, anarchy. Now, anarchy is a very misunderstood word. It means in Greek, no ruler, right? Anarchos.
Self-rule.
Now, it can imply self-rule. Anarchists are they have a variety of different views. They're not all, and again, the media have portrayed them as smashing shop windows, throwing bombs.
Some of them do.
No, that was a very cartoony
For some
image.
reason, the people who smash those shops have anarchy flags.
But that doesn't mean all anarchists smash shops. It's like, let's use basic induction here. It doesn't mean just because you see a few anarchists smashing some shops.
That tendency.
Some anarchists use violence, yes. I don't think violence is a helpful way to deal with your problems. If you've got an issue with capitalism, if you've got an issue with the state, and you think we should reorganize a free society based on equality, human rights.
But what does equality mean?
It's when every adult, there's no domination between adults.
But there's always been the rich ruling the poor. Money talks.
No, that's not true.
Well,
For most of human history, that hasn't been the case.
Are you joking?
Well,
yes, for most of human history.
There's been a structure of power.
Look, even in times when there wasn't money.
Yes, there has.
Among
the people who are
hunter-gatherers,
physically stronger.
archaeologists.
Are you joking? The chief of the tribe.
The tribe would be ruled by the strongest
Chiefdom is not
hunter-gatherers
did not organize.
Yeah, but the strongest, the physically strongest.
Yes, they did.
I studied anthropology at university. I know how this works.
Kyle, I don't care what you studied. People have been organizing in tribes, and the tribe has a tribe leader.
Listen,
It's a tribe
chiefdoms, they came about after sedentary, stable societies stayed in one place.
No, they didn't.
You didn't have chiefs of hunter-gatherer tribes.
Look at the
That's not how it
Amazon
worked.
forest. Kyle, wait. Look at the Amazon forest. Look at the tribes that the different colonial powers found that were separated from the rest of the world. They were living as hunter-gatherers, and all of them had some kind of leadership. Sometimes it would be a matriarch, sometimes it would be a patriarch, usually a patriarch.
But you realize how little power these people had. They had barely the power even to make recommendations to get followed. The thing is about these tribal cultures.
I don't know what you studied, Kyle, but it's not something.
Well, I'll give you the example of the Inuits. They're a good example. They didn't have any kind of leadership structures formalized as chiefs. They had leadership, of course. leadership and power is there, right? The best warrior, the best hunter, he's going to have more of a say. He's going to be listened to more than the other guy. But that doesn't mean domination. That doesn't mean hierarchical system. No,
Yes,
it doesn't.
does.
Why? Why does that mean that?
It
Why does one follow
automatically
from the other?
means that.
Why?
Carl, look
Why?
at history. Study history a little bit.
No, don't just say look at history. Answer my question.
Okay, you want examples. You want examples. You say that chiefs only form with sedentary societies, right? What about the nomads in Mongolia? Only the strongest of their khans would be able to unite all of them. And eventually, when Temujin became
Would it be
Genghis
warlike?
Khan,
Yeah.
he united all of them, even though they weren't sedentary.
That's not most
at
of
all.
human history, though.
Bro,
Most of human history has
Kyle,
been
it's one example.
egalitarian hunter-gatherer
and I can
bands.
give you dozens of other examples.
David Graeber.
You don't want to listen. You want to ignore.
Hold on, I'm answering your question.
Blissfully.
David Graeber has gone out. He's an anthropologist at the London School of Economics. Worked with another anthropologist to try and understand what kind of social structures we had before the creation of civilization. No, before even that.
Okay.
Well before that. Now, what they find is that actually, very likely, what you had in Europe among hunter-gatherers, Stone Age people, was a kind of fluid system. So during the winter
Gender
months,
fluid.
during the winter months, you might have had a little bit more of a hierarchical system, but it was temporary, very temporary. It wasn't established. When things were tight and there was an emergency or there was danger, so not enough food or not enough access to land for farming, then yes, you might have had a structure develop temporarily. Temporarily. As soon as things went back to normal in the summer months, you would have probably had a different way of running. That's quite a recent speculation, and I think that's a very valid speculation.
Okay, so wait. What time is that? Before what?
Well, we're
Give
talking-
me
listen,
like a
modern human like what they call behaviorally modern humans came about 45,000 years ago. Now, human beings in the anatomical form we have now, they've existed a lot longer than that. They've gone back maybe 200,000 years, right? But what you see in around 45,000 years ago is the beginning of complex housing structures, the ability to plan ahead, multiple years ahead of things. You start to see more intricate religions, symbols, metaphors start to develop. Now, there's no hierarchy in these societies. There's no permanent rule by a collection of priests or a collection of warlords. Or you mentioned the example of Genghis Khan, Temujin, and Stig. That's much later. It's a much later phenomenon. That's like not even. That's not even 600, 700 years ago.
You want earlier than that. Go for Attila. Exactly the same situation.
My friend, you could go back to Homer. Go back to 3,000 years ago in the ancient Greeks.
back to Homer,
They had a very, very violent, warlike warrior society where there was a clear hierarchy in kings. I'm not ignorant of human history and where we've come, but I'm also aware that this is a relatively small amount of time. If you consider that 45,000 years ago, we started to develop tools and much more complex tools, and develop symbols, religions, more modern housing that we see now, like complex housing. When you see that, the bow and arrow is much older. There wasn't any stable hierarchy back then.
Kyle,
There's nothing innately hierarchical about human beings.
Once again,
I think actually human beings favor equality. I'll give you an example of this.
Tribes,
Hold on a second. I'll give you an example of this, Nick. There was a study done of Whitehall. Whitehall is possibly the most hierarchical institution in Britain. It has about 19 layers of hierarchy going down, from the senior civil servants right down to more or less basically clerks, more or less. Even though they're civil servants, they're sort of just told what to do. They don't have much control over their work regime. Now, a study was done by a group of biologists, where American biologists, they came over to Britain and they studied them. They found out as you go down the levels of the hierarchy, stress increases, right? Psychological stress goes up. This to me suggests that I don't think human beings particularly do well in environments of hierarchy. They even interviewed a few of these lawyers and they asked them what it's like at the different levels, right? The lawyers at the top of the civil service were very relaxed. They had a lot of free time. They had a lot of time with their families. They had very low levels of cortisol in their bloodstream. So they were very healthy. The ones at the bottom though, the ones towards the bottom, chronically depressed. They took more days off work. They were often sick. And this is supposedly a good job, right? Being a civil servant is not a bad job. It's supposed to be a prestigious
Well,
job.
I
in
know
Britain.
this is.
So for me, that suggests that hierarchy is not a normal. It's not a normal way of being. It actually causes suffering to people at the bottom. And in fact,
Why do you think there is this? Because
Revolution,
in the
my friend.
1970s, there was no stress.
Revolution.
laughing
and
is
what
not an
after?
argument. Laughing is not an argument.
What will
In
come
1970s,
after? What
I'm not
will
interested in
come
talking to you. You're
after?
going to laugh
What
at me.
will
I'm not
come
going to talk to
after?
you.
In
You're going to laugh at me. I'm
What
not going to
will
talk to you.
come after the revolution?
1970s, there was no
Kyle.
stress, no depression,
Hello,
no
Kyle.
anxiety.
What
Stop.
will come
Stop.
after?
I'm answering Nick.
In the 1970s, as those of us of my age and older will know, there was no stress, there was no anxiety, there was no depression, there was no obesity.
In the 60s.
And probably the 60s as well.
I think you're being-
I didn't hear of
I
it
think
when I
you're-
grew up in the 70s.
I think you're romanticising the 60s
Well,
a bit. It was, if you were a black
that's how
person or
society
a
was.
woman in the 60s, I don't think it was great compared to how it is now.
Why do you think there is so much anxiety, stress, obesity? Why do you think the human being is less healthy than he was 40 years
I'll
ago?
tell you something. I don't
in
know.
everything, in his body, in his mind, in his demeanour.
No, can I be honest, Nick? In terms of human health, we've become healthier since
No,
the 60s. No, we have.
No,
Humans-
no.
Can I tell you something?
Health went down in
Look,
about 1980. It started going down.
Children born in 2017,
91.
a third of children born in 2017 will live past the age of 100. So in some ways, there's
Really?
been progress. Yes, that's true.
Something like
In some ways, there's been
50% of
progress.
children in China are now obese.
Obesity is a problem.
Slightly.
No,
They're not going to
obesity-
reach 100.
Obesity is linked to inequality. This is why I say I don't think inequality is a healthy way to be. If you look at all the rich countries and you compare them on levels of inequality, so the gap between the rich and the
Yeah.
poor in income, they find there's a very clear correlation. The ones that have more inequality have a higher level of obesity. So places like America and Britain, which have higher levels of a gap between the rich and the poor, they have actually. Do you know why this is? I'll explain it. I'm glad you mentioned obesity. A study was done of macaque monkeys by the same group of biologists who studied whitehall. They found out that the macaque monkeys that were at the bottom of the food chain, they tended to have more overweight. They tended to be more fat. Now, when you're stressed out,
Yes, I know.
your body conserves fat.
Cortisol is
Yeah.
released.
Now,
creates
being at the bottom of a
anxiety.
social hierarchy is more likely to create stress. You're gonna have less control. You're gonna have to be more submissive, more obedient. It's a very stressful experience. That's why I don't think it's a very human thing to have to deal with. Being told what to do all the time, it limits your autonomy.
yeah.
Human beings are naturally, I think, very creative and they value autonomy. It's a very strong human need to have control over your space. When that's violated, people get very angry. They feel very frustrated. But this is how our society is structured. Some people, they say we're free, but only outside of the workplace. I mean, when you're in the workplace, you have to basically do what you're told in exchange for. You sell your labor in exchange for an income, and you have to do what you're told. It's very. It's like
exactly said
it's
that
very.
back
It's
in
very.
19.
It's very immature. You think about it. The way we're treated. I mean, grown adults being
Yeah.
ordered around. Think about that for a second. And we don't ask this question. We don't, because it's like if you ask this question, then
You're immediately a black
yeah,
lady.
you get considered a crazy person. I mean, I bring this up. I mean, it's Speaker's Corner, so you're all listening to me. You could be going and listening to that guy. You could be out, having fun. But when I'm just bringing this up with friends at the pub, they'll think I'm crazy for talking about this.
Because you are.
Right, this is a normal reaction. We're trained from a young age to think whatever society you're in is the normal society. And to be told what to do in your workplace, to have a strong hierarchy of commands, where there's no direct democratic control over how the production happens. That's normal. That's the normal way to behave.
Carl, you want a revolution, but you don't have a plan what happens after that revolution. That is crazy.
After the revolution, society begins with real freedom, real liberty, I think.
That's an abstract platitude. You're not giving any plan. You're not giving any organization.
There's a way, Pavlov, to
You
get
need an
there's a way to get information about people and find out more about what they believe without being critical and being so negative.
Oh, that horrible criticism, it hurts, words hurt.
I don't mind being
Carl,
critical. I'm not
please.
hurt.
You
I'm
want
not
to
hurt.
do a revolution.
I'm trying to help you learn manners. Okay, that's all I'm trying to do.
Manners?
If you want me to give some
I
content
cursed
to what I'm said,
Well, I'm a vegetarian.
you call it a platitude. You can ask me what I mean by that. You can ask me what I mean by liberty. Instead of saying I'm being.
I've asked you what you mean, but
I'm not here to have a bitch. Go ahead, bitch fest. Okay. When I talk about liberty, I'm not just giving an abstract platitude, and I'm not just saying liberty is the freedom to buy 100 different types of tea, or toothpaste, or cereal at the supermarket. For me, real freedom and real liberty is to have control over the creative work you do, the things that you value in your creative life. It doesn't have to be the arts, like music or acting. It can be anything, really. What I'm doing at Speaker's Corner is not particularly artistic, but it's a creative act.
I'm not cool.
That's real freedom. What I'm doing right now, I am trying to exert that. Now, a lot of people don't have this freedom, what I have right now,
I heard
because they're frightened of what will happen if they get up and say something. If they get up and say something at Speaker's Corner, it might offend a future boss in a workplace. They may not have access to the kind of work they want to do. Maybe they want to be a lawyer and they don't want to be seen to be too outspoken about issues like what's happening to Julian Assange.
no homo, bro. No.
So they don't get up and speak. Is that real freedom? No, it's not freedom in my opinion. Real freedom is when you can say what you want without being heard. And now, more importantly, freedom, I think, rests on democracy. And I don't just mean being given a vote every 4 or 5 years to decide who you want to have, Jeremy Corbyn, Boris Johnson, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. That's not real democracy. And I know Nick is probably sick to death of this because I say this every week and he's here listening to me. But real democracy and real freedom is when you have a say in the rules that you have to follow. It's not when you can just do whatever you want. That's not real freedom at all. Because no one can just do whatever they want. That's not, we would just have chaos. It would just, things would fall apart. It's when you have a say in the rules that you follow. You help to decide the rules that you live under. That's for me real freedom. But we don't have that. We don't have that in the UK.
No, but most social behaviour is 99% of everybody does what everybody else does because it's socially acceptable. That's how we are. So if we all went walking, if we all around, we suddenly all started to wear green hats. Most people would want to wear green hats because that is a condition of human behaviour.
No, luckily, I when I was very young, I was about this girl's age, and I had that broken out of. Because what happened was the Iraq War happened, and my older brother was trying to convince me to be a pacifist, to say that war is wrong, that it's not okay to go and attack other countries, even if you think it'll help your country's self-defense. It's not a valid way of protecting yourself. And it took a long time. I was very young, and I thought, well, no, you have to defend your family, you have to defend your country if there's violence, But the more and more I looked at it, the more I realized, it's wrong. I know, although it's not the majority view, you naturally start to break out of these things. The problem is that school doesn't train kids to do this. School trains children to do what they're told, and that you can only feel good about yourself if I give you a gold star. You can't feel good about yourself otherwise. It's only when I say that you're a good girl and that you answer the question the way I want you to answer the question. That's the problem. I mean, I remember when I was your age, right? And I had to do a maths homework question. And I asked my dad. My dad is an architect, and he knew about, he could do maths quite easily. So I asked him for his help. He showed me a very simple way to do the question. And then I did the question that way. I got to school, and the teacher said, no, that's not the way we told you to do it in the lesson. That's wrong. Even though it was a perfectly valid way of doing it. This is the problem. School doesn't train children to find the answers the way they want to find them. It trains it to do, you have to do what the teacher says. And it's not just emotional dependency, where I can only feel good about myself if the teacher says so. It's also intellectual. So like I said, you've only got the right answer if I tell you you've got the right answer.
I agree with you, but what can we do?
Well, for one thing, I mean, okay, so first of all, just being aware that there's a problem is the first step.
Yeah, we
So I would say my very radical solution is, well, I don't think it's very radical, I think it's common sense, is to get rid of compulsory schooling. I think the idea that you should force children to go to school,
I agree with that in a way.
I think that's completely wrong. Now, if children want to go to school,
If parents want their
if a young
children.
girl really enjoys school and she wants to go, I think you should let her go to school. But I don't think it should be made the law that parents have to. So that's the first step.
Yeah.
But even more gentle than that, get rid of homework. See, there's a girl this age, right? Do you know that it's been proven homework has absolutely no effect on learning? Psychologists have found this out. They're looking at kids. There's absolutely no benefit to doing homework under the age of 15. If you're over the age of 15, then there's some benefit to doing homework. It's been proven. But if you're under that age, it's actually been shown to have absolutely no. Think about it. What you're doing is you're asking children to do another shift of work. They have 6 hours at school, these kids, and then they go home and they have to do another hour. And I'm amazed that we even let that happen, really. And often it's very stressful for the parents because the kid can't do the work and then they need help. The parents just come home from their job and they're tired. They don't have time to help. They just want to relax with their children. They don't want to be doing things that are like. So yeah, these little things could change. And I mean, eventually, I would like to see parents. I mean, I think parents should teach their kids, personally. And I think kids should teach themselves. Everything I've learned is from books. Everything I've learned in my life is from books, not from teachers, not even really from my parents. It's from books. That's how you learn. You read the books about the things you're interested in. You want to be a fashion designer, you read books about fashion design. If you want to be a public speaker, I've had to read about public speaking to do what I'm doing now. This didn't just come automatically. I had to study the way that public speakers do their work, you know. It's a very complicated thing, actually. It's more difficult than you might think.
Yeah, but to get a job in this system...
Right, now you're getting some... Yeah.
This is the thing. If
Yeah.
you get a job, you need accreditation.
Of course,
And
yeah.
then you need to go to school.
Well, what
and it's not that I believe in that,
No,
but
sure.
it's a system. How do you cut the system? How
Yeah.
people will get to what they need to live?
Again, no, what kind of jobs are these? They want to see... These jobs want to see that you can do what you're told.
This is a problem.
Right. They want to see that you can follow orders. That's what a kid is doing when they're doing paperwork. I mean, when they're doing homework. It's paperwork. They're being trained into being basically glorified office clerks, right? You know, as little kids. Because like I've said, psychologists, I mean, if you want to find out more about this, Alfie Kohn is the leading educational theorist in this field. He's written a lot about homework and how it's unhelpful, it doesn't help kids. Really what you're training kids to do is just to follow orders, to follow, you know, hierarchies. Now, it's hard, isn't it? As an individual, what can you do? You know, I need to get a job when I'm older, so I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get my kids to go to school because I want them to get a job. But the thing is, you as an individual don't have to worry. The thing is to change society as a whole. You don't change society by changing your own individual behavior.
Yes, you do. That's
it
the
can
only
help,
thing you
but really
can
the main
change.
thing is to change the law. Sorry?
You need to start somewhere. I mean,
So what do you
don't
think?
change
Why don't you answer the question? Maybe help me, because I don't really know the answer.
I mean, I think it's one step at a time, but it takes quite a lot of courage because it's stepping out from the system.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage. Like, yeah.
Well, it's because, like Nick said, you know, Nick, you were talking about how if everybody started wearing a green hat,
Yes.
then everyone would. Then you know you would feel very strange if you weren't wearing a green
Well, I
hat.
studied human behaviour,
Yeah.
and it is a fact.
There's a psychology.
Four phases: norming, storming. You see it at Speaker's Corner, challenging and breaking. And basically, human societies are continually in that state of one of the four things.
Yeah. No, I think there's been a lot of upheaval.
People get together, then they form hierarchies, then there's a challenge, and then maybe a break.
So the old hierarchies break down.
And then they reform again.
Well, I don't think they reform again. I mean, for example, hierarchies between men and women. That's since the 1960s and 70s.
That's broken down.
That is broken down, and that's not coming back. I'd be very surprised if in my lifetime I ever saw women being treated the way they were treated in the 60s.
They weren't treated badly. They just didn't have.
Well, they weren't even
didn't
aware
have
of
the
it a lot of
balls
the
to
time
say no. In a way,
yeah, that's the problem.
If you know what I
A
mean.
lot of the time, the victims don't really. They could very easily stop the victimhood.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, systems of hierarchy are only there because the people at the bottom let them be there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is written into the American Constitution. They realize this. Power rests on the consent of the governed. And they've even got the right to have a revolution built into their constitution. If they say if the government is violating our rights, then we have a revolution. It's right in the preamble if you're interested to read it. So now with children know this. Children know this. They don't know it like in a way, in a sophisticated way, but they understand. When they don't get what they want, they have a tantrum. And they sit down and they refuse to move. They know where power comes from. Power comes from the bottom up. It doesn't come from the teacher telling you what to do with a parent. Power actually comes from the person choosing to obey or disobey. Children understand that, and so when they disobey, they disobey. That's the reality, and that's how power works, and it changes over time when we become more conscious. Education is the way through it. If you were to ask me that question again, I would answer your question by saying education is the way forward. Knowledge is the only thing that can break the chains of slavery. The only thing. Sorry, what were you? He's in Belmarsh prison right now. He's from Australia originally. He's not Swedish, but sorry? So, Julian Assange, what's he done? No, thank you for asking that question. Julian Assange is right now in Belmarsh prison, and he hasn't committed a crime. He hasn't committed a crime. He's in prison right now because the government wants to make an example of him. He's right now awaiting extradition to the United States. He came to Britain. He was in the embassy, yeah. And then he was forcefully taken out of the embassy and then put in prison. You think so? Do you not? Do you not think sometimes people go to jail even if they haven't done anything? Sorry? Well, no. I went to a speech, Women Against Rape. There's a charity, the Women Against Rape. Lisa Norton's been speaking about Julian Assange, saying that the accusation that he's a rapist is completely unfounded, and it's being weaponized against him. It's being used as a way to smear him, make him look bad, even though there's absolutely no evidence that he's done any crime at all towards any women. I think if you really care about the issue of rape, you'll look for evidence for when it's happened. You're not just going to throw around that phrase without any evidence, you know? You see what I mean? I don't want to... Listen, I've gotten up here before and I've been called a misogynist for this, but, you know, I don't care. I mean, I believe in the idea of innocent until proven guilty, you know? I think if you really care about dealing with rape, then you're going to believe that. You're going to have evidence, right?
I know Boris. He's a very famous person.
But this is the problem. So that lady has a view of Julian Assange as being imprisoned to do with rape. That just shows you the lack of understanding of this issue. He's in prison right now because he's going to be, he's waiting because he actually hasn't committed anything wrong. He shouldn't be in prison. This is the crazy thing. He shouldn't be there at all. But he's there. You know? The British state want to make an example of Julian Assange. They want to say to the British public, this is what happens when you help to expose war crimes. You'll end up like Julian Assange. You'll end up almost dead. This is what's happened to him. The guy is like, he's been isolated so long now in this prison. I mean, he's been basically subject to torture. It's absolutely, I mean, it's very much deteriorated. It's gone like, I mean, according to Nils Meltzer from the UN, it's in like a kind of downward spiral. This is what's happened. It's very tragic. I mean, this is the thing, and the British public don't have the right information about this because the media have not done its job. The media have not accurately reported on what's happening to Julian Assange. And as long as that continues, we're not going to know anything about it. What's going on, really? And we're going to. Sorry?
It's not in the news now.
No, it's not. But look, just because it's not in the news doesn't make it important. I'm telling you this. I don't need to tell you this.
They covered it more when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy. Now he's in Belmarsh. They're not covering it.
And how did they cover it? How did they cover it? It was atrocious. The way they were smearing him. You had, there was a Guardian journalist who said he really is the most massive turd. You had lies about him throwing feces on the wall of the embassy. You had a complete lie made up by the Guardian that Paul Manafort, who was Trump's campaign manager, going to visit Julian Assange in the embassy when there was no evidence that had happened. They were trying to associate him with Trump, right, to make him look bad. That's disgusting, really absolutely awful. Saying that he was a misogynist, saying that he was a creep. The guy has autism, right? Like a very mild form of autism. So that makes it a bit hard sometimes, I guess, to show his facial expressions in the way other people do. But that's no reason to call him a creep, to say things like that. I mean, I think that's just despicable. If you want to find out more, I recommend Media Lens. They've done a very good analysis of the way the media have selectively ignored certain facts. Like, for example, when he was in the embassy of Ecuador, he said repeatedly to the investigators from Sweden who wanted to investigate him for this rape accusation, they said, if you think I've committed a rape, come and ask me questions about it. That's what he kept saying. His lawyers kept saying that. He said this to Marianne Nye, the prosecutor in Sweden. If you think I've committed a rape, come and ask me questions. I'm in the embassy of Ecuador. I'm not going anywhere because if I leave, the British government's going to arrest me and then possibly deport me off to America. So he stayed in the embassy. He said, come and ask me questions. If you don't want to come to England, we can interview each other over Skype. She refused to do that. She outright refused to do that. What's more, he even said, I'm happy to be extradited to Sweden. I'm happy to be sent off to Sweden to answer questions there. As long as the Swedish government will assure me that I won't be extradited to the US, like on onwards extradition from Sweden to the US. Are you following me? Is anyone not following me?
When's he going to be extradited now?
Well, he's getting a hearing. He's going to get an extradition hearing in February. He may not survive until then. This is the thing. His health is in such a terrible condition. He might actually die before then.
Is he still part of the WikiLeaks?
Yeah, I mean, no, not all journalists have done that. Yeah, he's the WikiLeaks publisher. I've got an article in the Camden New Journal, and if you'll forgive me from reading out, I think it's worth hearing. Camden New Journal, to their credit, have done an article about WikiLeaks and about Julian Assange. Assange, why the baffling media silence? This newspaper really has a lot going for it. I think if they have the courage to break out of that media silence, to break the mold. You're talking about how people, you know, do you mind holding that for me, Jacopo? Thank you. Then that's real bravery to break out of what the norm is. I mean, I was thinking about the psychology experiment where people go into an elevator, and if everybody in the elevator is facing the wall, they will turn on and face the wall as well. Even though that's not the normal thing to do in an elevator. The normal thing to do is to face the door, right? It's like that. People, they are like sheep a lot of the time. But then, you know, if you think critically and you engage your critical brain, then you know often you can break out of the stupidity. So, Assange, why this baffling media silence? The man sitting next to me in a pew in St. Pancras Church, Euston, on Thursday evening looked slightly nervous. I asked him how he knew of the public meeting that had brought us together, called to discuss the fate of the imprisoned Julian Assange, who some regard, perhaps melodramatically, as a political prisoner. No, that's not melodramatic. He is a political prisoner. He's being held for his political convictions. The man said that he had seen it on Twitter that afternoon and dashed along. You have to move fast if you see something on interest in Twitter, he explained. He had seen a notice of the meeting in the Twitter account of Craig Murray, very, very good blogger to read, Craig Murray. He used to be the ambassador to Uzbekistan for Britain. A former diplomat bitterly critical of the UK's foreign services. He's got 60,000 followers, which means you have to move fast. Now, I'm just gonna skip this part. It's all about the meeting I went to as well. It was a very good meeting at St. Pancras Church. I'm not gonna read about all of that, but I'll get on to... Yes, so... Two speakers, and I saw this as a brilliant speech. Two speakers, documentary filmmaker John Pilger and rapper Loki, pointed out that although no one can be extradited from these shores to the US on political grounds, so they can't be. The charge facing Assange is drawn from the American Espionage Act of 1917, enacted to jail conscientious objectors of the First World War. It goes back more than 100 years. It was used to imprison people like Eugene Debs, the great socialist labor activist. It was designed to stop people from resisting World War I. That's the thing they're trying to use to silence Julian Assange, right? So, daily newspapers such as The Guardian, New York Times, Sydney Morning Herald had published the leaked documents that had landed Assange in jail. They'd made money from Assange's leaks. WikiLeaks have, revealed things about the British government, about, to do with Iraq, and those newspapers have taken those stories and made money from that. They've sold newspapers through that. And yet he's still in prison and the newspapers haven't come out to support him. So it's terrible, it's such hypocrisy. It's like such a betrayal. So they published that leaked information that landed Assange in jail, making all these publications co-conspirators. By publishing that information, they are actually co-conspirators in so-called betraying the state, right? By revealing these secrets. Didn't this make their silence over the Assange case all the more outrageous? I think it did. Now, John Pilger described a visit he had made that day to see Assange in Belmarsh, where visitors, after being fingerprinted, were under the vigilant, tight control of guards who couldn't stop a loud row erupting between a woman visitor and a prisoner. It ended with 20 burly guards, according to Pilger, who pounced on the couple and took them away. I remember what Pilger said. This is the kind of prison Belmarsh prison is, right? This is what John Pilger said he saw while he was waiting for Julian Assange. This is the kind of prison Julian Assange is being kept in. Where is it? It's in southeast London. It's almost right on the edge of London. I cycled down there from here, actually. It's crazy. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's really far away. Now, what John Pilger saw was very dramatic. There was a domestic argument between a prisoner and his wife who come to visit him, and the police had come in and said, "Keep it down" to the prisoner, and the prisoner told the policeman to fuck off. He was like, "Oh, go away." He was very angry, and then literally 20 huge policemen came in and pinned him down. And they're like, that's the kind of oppressive, ridiculously over-the-top environment that Julian Assange is being kept in. This is a prison that's been used to keep maximum security prisoners, terrorists, that kind of thing, right? They want to associate him with these kind of criminals because they want to make an example of him. Now, Right, in a passionate speech, Loki reminded us how the great philosopher Bertrand Russell had gone to prison to protest against the severe punishment meted out to conscientious objectors to the First World War. Where are today's Bertrand Russells, he cried. I thought of the mild philosopher who believed in free speech so much he was willing to go to jail for it. And then I wondered about today's public intellectuals. I mean, it is shocking. Compare that to the past. You know, you have someone like Bertrand Russell is willing to stand up for his beliefs. Someone like Julian Assange willing to go to prison for what's happened. These leaks. Where are the intellectuals willing to do that? Where are the people willing to put their neck out for someone like Julian Assange? I don't hear this talked about in the media. It's shameful. I'm here on a ladder at Speaker's Corner, right? This is like in a park talking to about 40 people. Why isn't it this isn't an issue spoken about in the national media to hundreds of thousands of people?
Are XR getting involved in it?
No, I tried to interest him in XR. The problem is a lot of people on the left also believe that Julian Assange is a rapist, that he's a misogynist. They haven't taken the time to fully understand the issue. That's a real shame. On the left, you know, supposedly people committed to, you know, sorting out environmental problems, sorting out, like responding to war crimes, you know, spreading truth, creating equality, all those human values. They're not doing anything about Julian Assange. I mean, it's amazing. I suppose XR is a very single issue oriented organisation.
They're off to Heathrow today.
Yeah, sorry?
They're off to Heathrow
Right,
today.
what are they doing in Heathrow?
It's not disruption. They're invited John McDonnell and Boris Johnson to come and join them. They said they...
Right. Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Well, maybe you could...
Hey Carl, Hey Carl, let's borrow your platform.
Sorry?
Let's borrow your platform.
Hey, yeah, sure thing. Go ahead, man.
Thank
Do you want to leave? Thanks, man.
Change it around or go the other side.
Yeah, any other place, any place you want.
From your
Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. Listen. COE. Man, don't listen to BBC.
Sorry?
Man, don't listen to ITV.
Yeah, mine's breakup's ready. Okay. Okay, cool. So this is going to be a challenge to Muslims in general, but in particular, kind of a certain group of Muslims. And so this certain group of Muslims would be the ones who believe that in the ideal state, Islamic law should be implemented, and that part of that Islamic law should be that if you are a Muslim and then you convert to another religion and leave Islam, that then you deserve to be executed. So my question, particularly to that group of people, is if you believe that people should be killed for a crime which hasn't hurt anyone, and under normal circumstances you wouldn't kind of take someone's life simply for changing their opinion, changing their belief, you must have, since real good justification for that. You must have strong evidence that your reason for doing that is true.